Hello and welcome to the Entertainment Gig Music Edition, episode number 4. My name is Cleon. On this week's episode, we give you a little Spotify news. We discuss artist development, or the lack thereof these days. We review Bon Iver's new album, and we make a case for putting Yes into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Okay, let's get started with some news here. It has now been confirmed, as opposed to being a rumor before, that Lady Gaga will be the halftime entertainment at next February's Super Bowl. Also, in Spotify news, Spotify is going to start an invite-only service at the moment in Japan, thereby expanding their service from America and originally Europe, now moving into Asia. I'm sure they will be for everybody in Japan relatively soon, but that's the way Spotify likes to do things, is to do it by invite only at first, at least. Also in Spotify news, Spotify is in advanced talks, which really means they're pretty close to making it official. They're in advanced talks to buy SoundCloud, and the rich just get richer. But it's a smart move on their part, actually. In other news, Adele hits diamond status, which is 10 million copies sold, of her last album, 25. So, if anybody says that they can't sell a whole ton of albums anymore, Adele would be the exception to the rule. However, and this leads to our next piece of news, Adele did it because she did not sign the album up for any of the streaming services, like anything with Amazon Prime or Spotify or Apple Music or anything along those lines. And that's why she was able to sell that many albums. I have a funny feeling that some of the major artists are going to actually do that, because record labels, for the first time in a very long time, actually saw an increase in revenue over the first half of the year compared to last year and the year before and the year before that. And a lot of it has to do with streaming, because they make a lot of money, record label wise, that is, in terms of the amount of profits that you make off of streaming services. Record labels get anywhere from 50 to 60% of entire revenues from streaming services. A lot of that, however, really doesn't go to the artists. If you look at Forbes magazine's top 100 celebrities, specifically musicians and artists of that ilk. And Forbes is really good at breaking down how these artists make their money. And the vast majority of them make their money via touring, because album sales have crashed since the 90s. But they also break down a category as to how much money these artists are making off of streaming services. And in the big artist case, like Taylor Swift and Katy Perry and those types, their total take off of streaming services, considering how much money they make off of touring and even how much money they make off their album sales, as far as revenue goes, they make less than $1 million. Some of them only about $500,000. And these are artists that make, on average these days, about $50 to $60 million a year. So when you take that into consideration, artists pulling out of allowing their albums to go onto a streaming service may be the wave of the future if it can bump up their album sales. To be continued, I am sure. Okay, on to the topic of the week, which is artist development and the way it used to be and the way it is now. So, time for me to pull up my porch, tell you how it was back in the day. Back in the day, i.e. pre-Napster, I guess, if you were a record label executive and you were interested in an artist, a musician, maybe you heard them play live or you got a demo tape from them, you would call them up and you would tell them that you like their stuff and you're going to develop their career. You're going to give them a 3-album deal and you would develop their career step by step in order to build up their fan base, take them out on tour a little bit, work on their albums properly, get them the proper engineer, etc., etc. These days, if you're a record label exec, the first words that are probably going to come out of your mouth are, how many likes do you have on your Instagram? How many likes do you have on your Facebook fan page and all your other social media? It seems that these days, record labels want you to do all the artist development yourself and build up your fan base yourself, and then maybe they'll have a talk with you. Now, if you're an artist who wants to be with a major record label, that may be a little depressing, because the onus is now on you to do all the work. And a lot of artists aren't actually, shall we say, skilled, or they're not specialized as most people are not when it comes to social media and how to work it properly in search engines and all that sort of stuff. But it brings to mind the fact that in this day and age, a lot of your record deals are 1 album and out. Now think of all the artists that you love now who started way back in the 70s or the 80s or even the 90s, who you would never have heard of if they had a 1 album and out deal. I'll give you 2 examples right off the top of my head. First one is U2. U2 put out Boy, their first album, critical success, commercial flop. U2 didn't get popular until, coincidentally, MTV started getting popular in the early 80s, and U2 put out Sunday Bloody Sunday and New Year's Day. And MTV played those in heavy rotation, but by then that was their 3rd album. They got a little more popular on their 4th album with The Unforgettable Fire because of Pride in the Name of Love. Then they did Live Aid, and then when the Joshua Tree came out, that's when they got really popular. But by then, that was their 5th album. So let's just say, just for shits and giggles, that they actually started to catch fire a little bit on their 3rd album. But that's 3 albums. They had 2 other albums that, while the critics loved them, no one bought them, except for maybe some people over in Ireland. Or in certain parts of Massachusetts, basically, because a lot of Irish people are in Massachusetts and had heard of the band and it sort of organically brought them over, which is how I found out about the band. But imagine if they only had a 1-record deal, like most artists do these days. They would have stopped at Boy and then no one would have ever heard of them again. And think of all the great music that they've put out since. I'll give you another one. Bruce Springsteen, who just celebrated his 67th birthday the other day. Greetings from Asbury Park was his first album. You can get it in the discount bin on Amazon for a few bucks. The album flopped miserably. He was another one. The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle was the second album. Critical success, major flop. Born to Run was the one that made Bruce Springsteen into Bruce Springsteen. And that was his third album. Again, if they only had one album deals, you would have never have heard all this great music from Bruce Springsteen. And there's a lot of other artists that have this issue. So as far as artist development goes these days, unfortunately, it's put upon the artist, which, if you're going to do that, you have to develop your social media skills. You have to get out there and promote yourself a lot. My personal suggestion is that you go and you just get a friend or somebody to actually do it for you if you're not really good at it. But get your name out there one way or the other, because unfortunately, this is the way the major record labels want you to do it now, is to get out there, promote yourself, build up your own fan base, and then they'll set you up with a deal. That way, hopefully, your first album will at least sell something so you can make it to your second album, because you may only get one shot, at least as far as a major record label goes. So that's the way things are done now. It would be nice if everything went back to the way they used to be done so that you could actually develop properly, but this is the way things are. So if you're trying to get a record label deal, start doing a whole lot of social media. Okay, we are going to do the quick hit review, which is this week the new album 21 A Million by Bon Iver. This album, in the quick way of doing things, is an acquired taste. This is, well, you're either going to like it or you're not going to like it. There is no middle ground on this one. To me, there's an awful lot of auto-tune. There's a lot of slow songs. It's a very eclectic album. I personally would not buy it, at least not yet. I may stream it a few times to give it a whirl and see, but my thought at the moment is don't really buy it. If you're gonna get anything from him on this one, I would probably go with 33 God, 10 Death Breast, 666 Upside Down Cross is turning into one of my favorites on it. A couple also rans are 21 Moonwater and 8 Circle. There is a method, excuse me, there is a method to the madness in terms of why he has numbers in front, but I'll let you discover that for yourself. It's not really worth a buy. I would get a few singles and be done with it at this point, I would say. Unless you listen to it a couple of times and it begins to grow on you. For me, so far, not so much. So, cannot recommend Bon Iver's new one, unfortunately. Okay, it's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame time. Now, to reiterate, in order to be nominated for a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, if you are a performer, your first album, major label debut would have had to have come out at least 25 years ago. This time around, we are going to talk about the band Yes, who had their first album out in 1969, entitled, shockingly, Yes. The group has gone through 19 different members in all those years. The group is still active today, even with the death of Chris Squire, who was one of their original members, and is up until his death, the only member to perform with Yes throughout their entire history with no time off for anything. Here's the thing. I think there's a stigma with Yes because they are progressive rock, and much like how a lot of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame voting members are not major fans of rap or hip-hop and allowing it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they also seem to have a stigma about progressive rock groups. Rush took forever to get into the hall, and finally it happened a few years ago. Yes has been around since 1969, has spawned some amazing offshoots. For instance, a couple of the members of Yes ended up starting off Asia, the 80s supergroup. Also, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and the Buggles of Video Killed the Radio Star. Their two members became members of Yes. This is how wide the tentacles get spread out from that group. 19 different members, a lot of them ended up in other groups and supergroups and went off to do great careers on their own. That alone should get them in. But you consider their body of work. If you're going to get anything from them, I would highly recommend 4 albums. I would get Fragile and Close to the Edge for their earlier incarnation. And then, if you were like me and caught on to them in the 80s, 90125 with Owner of a Lonely Heart and Big Generator with Love Will Find a Way. 90125 was their zenith, basically, in terms of commercial success. The album went on to sell 6 million copies, spawned a ton of hits, and then everybody went back and started listening to the older stuff like Roundabout and songs of that nature. This group has had major influence on the way music has been performed in terms of musicians. Not so much in terms of commercial success or that sort of thing, but in terms of just the flat-out major musicians that have come out of this group. This alone should make them members of the Hall. Now, to the Hall's benefit, they were nominated last year in 2015, but did not make the final cut. So I'm hoping that this year, this is the year that Yes gets in finally into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Okay, it's record store time. New releases coming out this week are Norah Jones, Fish, Pitbull, Green Day, NoFX, Sum 41, and my personal favorite, Time to Get Rickrolled, with Rick Astley's new one. Also, in the 99-cent bin on Google Play this week, you can get for 99 cents Linkin Park's A Hybrid Theory, classic album, Blink 182 with California, and Banks and Steels with Anything But Words. For $3 you get 3 albums, and they're all great. Can't go any better than that. On Amazon Prime this week, you can stream the new ones from Mandolin Orange, The Pixies, and Passengers. And the earworms for the week, I've got 2 of them, and they're both singles. There's a new one from The Weeknd with Starboy, and X Ambassadors have a new one out. It's called Unsteady. Both of them are worth a listen. Both of them are really good. You will want to check them out. And that is it as far as the Entertainment Gig Music Edition goes for this week. And now here comes Loudmouth to tell you all that fun legalese and blah 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 blah. Enjoy your week. We will talk with you next week. That is it for this week's episode. Our website is theentertainmentgig.com. Our Facebook page is at The Entertainment Gig. We are on iTunes and Google Play at The Entertainment Gig, but we are also on SoundCloud at CJBT-Productions and on YouTube at CJBT Productions, which has a slideshow of my photography, which you can find on Facebook at CJBT Photography, and the portfolio at cjbtproductions.zenfolio, that's zenfolio.com. And that is it. We will talk with you next week. Take care.